There are crimes that shock, and then there are crimes that haunt. The Keddie Cabin Murders fall into the latter. It's been over 4 decades since the brutal slayings inside Cabin 28, yet the air around the case remains heavy with dread, confusion, and frustration. What began as a quiet spring morning in the remote town of Keddie, California, quickly turned into one of the most disturbing cold cases in American history. A family destroyed, a child missing, a town left with more questions than answers. And the worst part? The killers may have walked away, free, unnoticed, and possibly protected. Keddie wasn't the kind of place you'd expect violence to strike. Tucked into the woods of Plumas County, it was a former railroad resort turned low-income housing area by the early 1980s. The Sharp family, a struggling single mother and her 5 children, had moved there to start fresh. Glenna Sue Sharp had left an abusive marriage behind in Connecticut and was trying to rebuild her life. Her modest home, Cabin 28, sat just off the railroad tracks. Rustic, worn, but a place of refuge. Or at least, it was supposed to be. On the evening of April 11, 1981, things seemed ordinary in the Sharp household. Sue stayed home, while her daughter Sheila went to a friend's house for a sleepover. Inside the cabin, Sue's 15-year-old son John had his friend Dana Wingate over. Sue's younger children, Rick and Greg, along with their little friend Justin Smart, were tucked into bed. The night was calm, but something dark was already lurking in the shadows, something that would leave a bloodstain on Keddie's history that never fully faded. When Sheila returned home the next morning, she walked into a nightmare that no one, especially a child, should ever witness. The living room was drenched in blood. Her mother lay on the floor, bound with medical tape and electrical cord, her face beaten beyond recognition. John was nearby, his head savagely bludgeoned, his throat slashed. Dana, too, had been violently attacked, showing signs of strangulation and blunt force trauma. The scene wasn't just a murder, it was a display, a message. But who was it for, and why? Even more chilling than the brutality was the selective nature of the violence. 3 younger boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, had been sleeping in the adjacent bedroom. They were untouched. Either they hadn't seen anything, or they had been spared for reasons no one could understand. And then came the final twist. Tina Sharp, Sue's 12-year-old daughter, was gone. Not among the living, not among the dead. She had simply vanished from the crime scene, as if plucked from reality by invisible hands. Investigators arrived quickly, but their response would be marred by a series of critical errors that would haunt the case forever. The crime scene was never properly secured. Neighbors and curious townsfolk wandered in and out, contaminating potential evidence. Law enforcement seemed disorganized, overwhelmed, and at times, oddly detached. Despite the clear signs of a targeted attack, no suspects were immediately arrested. And even as certain names began to circle, the investigation stalled again and again, like someone was deliberately pulling the brakes from behind the curtain. Early suspicion fell on 2 men. Martin Smart, the stepfather of Justin, the boy who had been inside the house during the murders, and his friend, Beau Boubed, a former Chicago cop with rumored ties to organized crime. Both had strange inconsistencies in their alibis. Martin even told police his hammer had gone missing, a detail that would later become disturbingly relevant. He also wrote a suspicious letter to his wife, confessing he paid the price for loving her, and referencing 5 lives that had been affected. Yet despite this, both men were allowed to leave town. No charges, no real pressure, no justice. The situation only grew darker. Justin, the boy who had been asleep in the next room, began having nightmares, disturbing visions of people being attacked. Under hypnosis, he described details that hadn't been released to the public. The weapons, the bindings, even suggesting Tina had been taken out of the cabin alive. Yet law enforcement dismissed much of what he said. In hindsight, his recollections might have been key to cracking the case. But at the time, it was treated like the ramblings of a scared child, not the testimony of a potential eyewitness. It wasn't until 1984, 3 years after the murders, that Tina Sharp's remains were found. A bottle collector stumbled upon a fragment of human skull in Camp 18, nearly 30 miles away from Keddie. Alongside it were scraps of clothing and a small jawbone. Dental records confirmed the worst. Tina had been murdered and dumped like trash in the wilderness. Whatever hope had remained that she had escaped was gone. The horror of the crime had come full circle. But again, no arrests were made. Years passed. The case grew colder. Cabin 28 was eventually demolished, perhaps in a symbolic attempt to erase the pain. But the memory lingered. Locals whispered about cover-ups. Former detectives claimed they had been pressured to stand down. New investigators eventually reopened the case decades later and uncovered stunning facts. A box of evidence had been misplaced for years, including a tape recording of a man confessing to the murders. But by the time these revelations surfaced, the trail had gone ice cold. The suspects? Dead or missing. The families? Still waiting for closure. The idea that such a violent, calculated crime could go unpunished has left a scar not only on the Sharp family, but on the entire Keddie community. Whispers of corruption within the local sheriff's office persisted. It was no secret that Martin Smart had personal ties with law enforcement, and some believe those connections helped him evade consequences. A therapist who later interviewed Smart even claimed he confessed to the killings, but added that he couldn't be arrested because there was no proof. Somehow, that was enough for the authorities to let it slide. When the case was officially reopened in 2013, advances in forensic science reignited interest. New DNA testing on evidence from the crime scene revealed a match to a living suspect, someone already connected to the investigation. Yet despite the match, the name was never publicly released. Was it Martin? Bo? Someone else entirely? Law enforcement stayed quiet, and for the families of the victims, it felt like justice was being dangled just out of reach, yet again. What makes the Keddie Cabin murders so chilling isn't just the brutality. It's the proximity. The idea that the killers may have been known to the family, may have visited them before, may have even smiled at them in passing. It's the sense that evil didn't come crashing through the door like a monster. It slipped in quietly, as a friend. And once inside, it showed no mercy. There are theories, of course. Some believe the murders were the result of a drug deal gone wrong. Others think Sue Sharp was the true target, and the rest were simply collateral damage. Some even speculate that Tina witnessed something, maybe a fight, a secret, or an affair, and had to be silenced. But without solid proof, the case remains a fog of half-truths and dead ends. The crime scene itself seemed staged in a way that suggested personal anger. Overkill. Rage. The use of multiple weapons, hammer, knife, even a rifle butt, spoke to chaotic violence. Yet the bindings and gagging were organized, deliberate. It was both frenzy and control, passion and planning. That's rare. And it suggests more than one killer, just like the composite sketches from Justin Smart's hypnosis session had indicated. Some clues from the original scene remain truly bizarre. A bent steak knife found near the bodies. Medical tape from a military supply, something not commonly found in homes. Blood spatter patterns indicating movement, dragging, staging. A phone taken off the hook, lights left on, curtains drawn. As if the killers wanted the scene to be discovered, but only after they were long gone. It was horror choreographed with intent. To this day, Cabin 28 is no more. After years of standing abandoned, it was torn down in 2004. But people still drive past the empty lot, still point at the spot where evil came calling. Ghost hunters, armchair detectives, and true crime addicts alike continue to revisit the case, analyzing every detail, every police report, every overlooked lead. In their minds, the case isn't cold. It's unfinished. Many hope that modern forensics or a deathbed confession might one day crack the case wide open. Some believe that with enough public pressure, buried evidence could still resurface. And others think we already have the answers. We've just never had the courage to face them. In a case where nearly everything has been fumbled or lost, one thing remains. The victims deserve more than silence. They deserve the truth. The story of the Keddie Cabin Murders isn't just about a crime. It's about a system that failed. It's about the danger of apathy, the rot of corruption, and the cracks in justice that let monsters slip through. For Sue, John, Dana, and Tina, there was never a second chance. But maybe, just maybe, there's still time for answers. If this case disturbed you as much as it did me, don't let it fade into obscurity. Share this story, keep their names alive, and let the world know that silence is not justice. And if you're drawn to the dark corners of real crime, unsolved mysteries, and chilling truths, subscribe to Crime Chronicles. Because the stories you haven't heard yet are the ones that stay with you forever.